Hello, Bethany. We missed you so much last week, but I'm glad you hopped back in for week 3 at Chic Critique. This is Tiffany Bender with Munchkins Mohawks Photography. So let's take a look at some of your pictures this week. Let's take a look. All right. So, okay. I think first thing I had asked about is if you could post some larger files. And I don't think you're asking what settings your camera needs to be in to shoot raw images. So I'm guessing you're shooting JPEG right now. You're going to see a lot more freedom in your editing abilities if you're shooting in RAW. I found a little image where you can kind of see how to quickly do that. So you would just go into your menu settings and you're going to go into your image quality. It's probably on something like fine right now. You're going to want to switch that over to RAW. So you can do RAW plus JPEG at first if you're not comfortable necessarily editing the RAW files. So that gives you the freedom to have two file types. You'll get a JPEG that you're normally used to, and then you'll also get the RAW file. So then you've got a little bit of freedom to kind of play around and see what you can do in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, ACR, with that RAW file. So go ahead and flip that over from image quality fine, change that over to RAW plus JPEG. That's just in your settings on your camera. I don't know exactly what camera you have, but a quick Google search or pulling out your manual should help you out with that. Okay, so let's take a look at your pictures this week. I love this first image you've posted. I think you said this was a image you took of your friend's son. It was shot in their barn. It's great. I love, love, love to shoot in barns. What happens is it almost acts like a softbox. So you've got this darker light behind you, and then you've got the opening from the door, allowing light to come in directionally, and that's the case here. So I love that we've got some nice shadowing from the inside of the barn and the light kind of coming in on his face. His eyes are just totally lit up, amazing. His expression's adorable. A couple things I want to look at. Let's pull this into Photoshop. Okay, so first thing that jumps out to me is we lost a little bit of a hand here. So like in other images that I've critiqued, I say I like to keep the lines, the lines going. So you can see here, whoopsie, what am I doing here? You can see we're losing part of that line. Why is that not working? Oh, we're in curves, okay. Sorry about that, okay. So you can see here, we're losing part of his hand. So part of the story gets cut off. My eye is disrupted, and I can't continue down the image. So I want you to take a step back and make sure that we are getting our whole story in the picture. Your composition is rather well. So let's take a look at the rule of thirds. You can see he's falling right here on our top third line, which is pleasing. I would even venture to go in just a little bit more with your crop. There you go. Great. I love how you've got him framed here on the side of the door. So what I do love about barns is that you can get a nice dark background with nice light on their face. Oh, I think I have a picture I can show you. Let's see here. I like to shoot in barns because of this reason. I think I have one that almost looks like it's a black backdrop. Okay, so that was one. Okay, give me 1 second here. I'm sorry, Bethany. Here we go. Okay, so these pictures were shot right inside the doorway of a barn. So you can see that we've got this beautiful light coming in on her face and then this dark background because there's no light back in this barn here. Same deal here. So we've got the framing. I think I was trying to straighten this out here. I've got the framing from the door or the archway of the barn, and our subject's popping right off the page. So I'd like to see you do that if you've got the opportunity to shoot inside a barn. So if you had a raw image, you would easily be able to pull down the exposure and then use the adjustment brush to bring our subject back up. But if we're working on a JPEG, I would pull down in curves and I would use the adjustment brush and kind of just bring our subject back up with a white brush. what the white brush does, I'm sorry, the black brush, is it erases the darkening of the curved layer we just did. Okay, so you can kind of see that's where it's on. Here's our before and our after. Another thing you could do is use the burn tool. I don't use it often, but there's a million ways to do the same thing in Photoshop. So you can kind of come in here and darken this up a little bit, just to kind of make him the focus of our image. Okay, but great job. I love his expression. It's really natural. Watch our lines, and then when we're shooting in a barn, I love to have a darker background, so we could pull that exposure down and have our subject really pop off the page. Great job. All right, our little cutie up next here. She's just so adorable. I'm glad she likes her little persnickety outfit. She just looks so cute in it. Okay, so there's a couple of things that I think could make this image stronger. So first thing, I love how you've got her looking back into our image, but I would love to see if you could have her drop her shoulder a little bit. So I'll kind of tell them to like almost lean forward. Let me see if I can draw. So her shoulder is kind of distracting from her face. So tell her to push her shoulder down just a little bit. And you can kind of visually go beside her and say, do this, and kind of push your shoulder down like somebody's sitting on your arm. So that might help her understand where we want to go with that. Okay, as far as composition goes, we had talked about the golden spiral. So let's see if we can make that happen. So the image you shot was vertical. So I would love to have either seen this in a closer crop or shot horizontal. So there were a couple shots that I had in my head, or that I had thought of when I saw this picture. So there's a couple different ways you could have gone. So this image here has a similar feel to I think what you were going for. So looking over the shoulder, but that's where I'm saying I would have loved to have seen more space. So oops. If we could have shot it more at, let's see here, this, let's flip that around. Okay, we're going to duplicate that layer. Now, I would do all of this in camera and not necessarily actually do this in Photoshop. This would take way too much time. But for the purposes of showing you how your composition can change, so I'm stretching this canvas all the way over. And I'm going to create a mask, Command I to invert, and I'm going to just kind of paint that back in here. Okay. Excuse the crudeness of this, but I really want to be able to kind of just give you that idea of the principle of how this composition would work. Okay. So now I'm going to duplicate the layer again, flatten that image, Command T. Okay. All right, so let's flatten that again, and of course I would come in here and kind of work this all out. Let's see. Bethany, this is very rough. Don't do this and show this picture to a client. But so you would shoot this purposely with the landscape coming leading up to her. Okay, so the landscape would be leading up to her. Like I said, don't do this in Photoshop. But so we've got our golden spiral going, whoop, landing right on our subject. So our eyes are drawn right to her. I love how she's looking back at me in the image. So I'd like to see you have her drop her shoulder. And I would like to see you, let's see, in Photoshop, we're going to brighten her face up a little bit. So I really like my subjects to be the focal point of their image. This is the story after all. So we're going to grab the, let me go back here, I'll show you, the curves layer. We're going to use a little hand, and we're going to put the eyedropper right on her face. I'm going to click down and then pull up. Okay, so I don't like how it brightened all of the rest of this. So I'm going to Command I to invert, and we're just going to use a brush, B for brush, and use the bracket keys to make it larger. Let's do a little dot on her. Okay. So in Lightroom, I would have brought this down exposure-wise. I'm not doing it in Lightroom because it's a JPEG, and RAW files function much better in Lightroom. So I would have brought down the exposure. I would have done a little post-crop vignette, and then I would have brought her up with the exposure brush in Lightroom. Okay, so drop her shoulder. Love her expression. I love how she's holding her hand. She's a perfect little model for you. So as far as camera settings, I don't know what your camera settings were on this. Let me see. I think... I do know what your camera settings were. Great. Okay. So I can see that you shot this at f8, 1/160, and a ISO of 200. Okay. So to get more of that creamy bokeh, that blur in the background, like you would see here, so it's all kind of blurred out, you're going to want to open up your lens. So let's put that aperture down as low as you can possibly go. I think it said you have, let's see. Oops. You can go down to 4.5. So I would go down to 4.5. What happens is when you get your aperture number is lower, which means it's wider open, you're going to get a shallower depth of field, which is going to make your subject most in focus. So if you focus right on them and you have your background far enough away from you, which you do, this would all turn into like that beautiful bokeh, that beautiful like blur. So next time, let's take a look. Or what story we're telling? Are we telling a story about the landscape? Are we telling a story about just her? Oops. So if it's a story about the overall feel of the environment, we're going to shoot this in a horizontal manner. We're going to choose a wider open aperture, and we are going to decrease the exposure and bring her up with the adjustment brush. If our story is just going to be her sweet little face, then I want to see you crop it something like this, okay? So we could do either of the two. So this is either our story or we've got the whole image in. So I hope that helps you with that one. Okay, moving right along. Oops. We've got our last image at the pumpkin patch. Okay. Let's talk. This image was shot, looks like in the middle of the day, and I'm seeing a lot of bright areas, so areas that are kind of a little bit distracting. So she kind of is getting lost in the image to me. Let's look at that in Photoshop. Okay, so when I am shooting, I am looking for light, composition, and connection. Okay, so let's talk about our light. Our light is midday. Now, I don't know if you heard from some of the other girls on their critiques. I like to shoot 2 hours before sunset. Oh, look at her cute little boots. Those are Joyfully, I think. How cute. If we're shooting midday for snaps of, like, you know, we're capturing an event that's in midday, we're not going to be trying to get traditional portraits. And if we are, we've kind of got to get creative with it. But right now I'd recommend that you start working in light that is easier to work with and more pleasing for your subjects. So 2 hours before sunset, I want to see you out there practicing, okay? So you're going to have the sun behind their head, 2 hours before sunset. So the sun's going to be kind of back here peeking out and coming in this direction. So Bethany, I want you to get lower. So right now I feel like I'm taking a picture standing exactly where I am. So I'm 5'8". I'm standing at 5'8" and I'm taking a picture at her. So it just looks like it doesn't look like I'm engaged with her. So I want you to get down on her level. I want you to come in, bend your knees, get down on her level. I want you to capture her, the essence of Maddie. So kind of get down on her level. So first thing we would adjust is the time of day, lighting. The next thing I want to talk to you about is the connection. So although I love the environment, I love the beautiful pumpkins all in the background and the trees starting to change, I really don't feel connected to her. I know maybe she's going to get a pumpkin, I'm really not sure. So if maybe she was leaning over into the pumpkin, that might be more effective. Or if she had a pumpkin in her hands and kind of was looking back at you like, oh, look what I got. There was more of a story to tell. Right now it kind of feels like you caught her in an in-between moment. So be purposeful with your shots, okay? And the last thing I want to talk to you about on this image is composition. So again, I feel like she's getting really lost in here. There's not a lot of difference between her and the background. So composition-wise, she's just kind of fallen flat dab in the middle of the page. You can kind of see she's just right here. There's really not a lot of movement as far as where my eyes are being led through the image. So you could have placed her. What I probably would have done is placed her on the left-hand side of the shot this horizontal, and kind of maybe had her piled up with a bunch of pumpkins in her hands and giggling. And then I would have flipped it in Photoshop so it ended up on the right side of the page. Just because I like this side. This side feels heavier to me because it's got the darker colors, so it felt like the cornfields would be leading up into her, if that makes any sense. So with this image, let's look at your settings. All right, we're at f13, aperture 4.5, ISO 200. Okay, so looks like this might have been shot in auto, maybe normal program. I'm not sure what that means exactly. So if you want to flip that over to manual, put your aperture at the lowest possible number that you can, which is shooting wide open, maybe a 4.5, which is going to make your subject pop off the page. You want to make sure you're shooting 2 hours before sunset. If you're at f4.5, you're going to have to up your shutter speed, because what happens at 4.5 is it lets more light in. So we have to allow that for a quicker amount of time, or else it will be too bright. Okay? And the ISO rating of 200 is fine. You could go even lower, down to 100. Now ISO is how I think about it is they're little worker bees that help gather the light. So this is like your helper bee here that helps bring additional light in when we need it. So right now we don't need any additional light, so you can take that down as low as it can possibly go. Okay, so I hope that helped you this week. So next week I really want you to work on shooting during golden hour, or the last 2 hours of light during the day. I would like to see if you can get your subjects really connected, and I want you to work on shooting as wide open as your lens will allow. But great shots this week, and hopefully you won't be too busy at work this week. At least get out there, and if you can only squeeze in 1 or 2 shots, I would love to see what you've come up with. I think I've answered all your questions for this week, and I hope to see some more images from you next week, Bethany. Thank you.